What is going on, everybody? Welcome back to Yelling and Propelling, episode number 2. If this is your first time tuning in, then welcome for the very first time. I'm stoked to have you here. Shout out to Spike Lee. Shout out to Courtney Lee, not related, by the way. And big shout out to Julius Randle, who we will be talking about a ton today because the question we will be trying to answer, the topic at hand, is what happened to the Julius Randle that we all knew and loved from last season. I wanted to quickly mention that if you're listening to this on Spotify, the show is available on all other podcast platforms as well as YouTube, and then vice versa. If you're listening to this on YouTube, check out the show on all other podcast platforms. Take a listen on whichever platform is most convenient to you. Allow me to begin by giving you guys some information on how the past few games have gone for the Knicks going back to March 18th, Friday in MSG. We squeaked one out against the Wizards. We led for most of the game, but then in the fourth quarter, Kyle Kuzma almost single-handedly brought his team into it and almost stole it from us, but thankfully he did not. And we got a pretty balanced scoring effort, 18 apiece for RJ and Julius, 15 each for Evan Fournier, Mitchell Robinson, and IQ off the bench. Fast forward to Sunday, again in MSG, we lost to the Jazz 108-93. I feel like we never play well against Rudy Gobert and company, so this game was no exception. As Clyde said, it was the Donovan Mitchell and Jordan Clarkson show. Clarkson with 23 off the bench, and Mitchell with a very impressive, very efficient 36, 8, and 6. Tom Thibodeau elected to go with the starters in the fourth at a point when the bench unit had actually brought us within 4, forcing Quinn Snyder to call a timeout. This ultimately led to our demise in the game, and really, Tibbs is really trying to make me regret my final decision from last episode that I think he should retain his head coaching job for next season. Also, definitely worth mentioning that at the very end, Julius Randle and Rudy Gobert got into it. Well, not even got into it. It was just some pushing and shoving, and Rudy Gobert went to make amends with Randle. Randle wanted none of it and basically started having a meltdown. Certainly not a pretty sight, and certainly not the first time that this has happened with Julius Randle this season, but I'm actually going to get into all that in a few minutes, a little bit later in the show. Moving on to Tuesday, however, we played the Hawks. That's always fun. Last time we played them was Christmas Day. That was a great game in MSG. Super fun to watch. We played phenomenal. This game, we actually didn't play horrible. There was times in the game where we looked okay. We were up as many as 12 in the game. That was earlier in the first half. And then we were up 9 in the fourth with 5 minutes remaining. And then an 11-0 run from the Hawks sealed the deal. And that just goes to show how horrible our late-game execution is. Trae Young and Bogdan Bogdanovic combined for 77 points. And lastly, I'm actually recording this late Wednesday night, so just a couple hours ago we defeated the Hornets in the second of the back-to-back, 121-106. Completely forgot to mention that Julius sat out in the Atlanta game as well as this one with a sore right quad. Again, something I'm going to get into in just a few minutes. But yeah, this game was really fun to watch, especially the first 14 minutes. Listen to this. So in the first 14 minutes of the game, we hit 11 threes, had 15 assists, and only one singular turnover in the first 14 minutes. The ball was moving so freely, and we just looked like the better team, which is great. Back-to-back 30-point games from RJ Barrett. It kind of sort of keeps our play-in tournament hopes alive, so there's that. And then also Evan Fournier now officially holds the franchise record for the most threes in a season. He surpassed John Starks. So 2 wins, 2 losses in our last 4 games. We're currently sitting at the 11th seed now, 31-42 on the season, 5 games back from the 10th seed, that final play-in spot, and the team that currently holds the 10th seed is none other than the Atlanta Hawks. So only 9 games remaining in this season and 5 games back from the last play-in spot, the 10th seed. It's not a fun predicament to be in. So what we have to do is start accepting our fate and realizing that this season is a lost cause, super slim chance we make the play-in, let alone the playoffs. Playoffs? Don't get me started on playoffs right now. So yeah, we have to accept our fate. We have to start thinking about next year. So when you think about next year, or at least when I think about next year, I think of, first of all, Tom Thibodeau, which is why I did that first episode about Tibbs. Should we bring him back? Should we not? And then you think of our leader, Julius Randle. What's the deal with him? Well, that's what we're trying to answer today. Why has he struggled so mightily this year compared to last year when everything came easy to him? He was a top 5 MVP candidate. So what changed? Why has he had such a decline this year? Why has he regressed so much this year? Let me first pose a question for you guys. So tell me, has there ever been another player to go from, in the span of 3 seasons, to go from get this guy out of here in season 1, I don't want him on our team anymore, season 2, MVP candidate, face of the franchise, everybody in the organization loves him, all the fans love him, and in season 3, back to where he was in season 1, where it's the general consensus among the fans was that they want him out of here. It's not working out. Because that's what it's been for Julius Randle. Season 1, he came from the Pelicans. He had a great year with the Pelicans. They didn't want him back. He comes to the Knicks. I was super excited about it. A lot of fans were excited about it. Definitely thought that he could grow into an all-star and be our guy. He definitely underperformed for season 1, but we had very high expectations, and it was also his first time being the number 1 scoring option. So it took him some time to adjust to seeing these double teams, and we also didn't even have a very good team around him. So there's multiple excuses you could give for why his first season was rough. But what the majority of Knicks fans were saying was, yeah, this isn't going to work out. Julius Randle is not a number 1 scoring option. Season number 2, bam, he puts all those doubts to rest and then some, leads our team in points, rebounds, and assists, and leadership. He was our leader. He was our number 1 guy in effort, in just everything, every facet of the game. He was the guy we played through, and we were great. Like it was fun to watch. He just was playing inspiring basketball in season number 2. You can't say enough about his play last season. And I really think a lot of Knicks fans took this for granted. I mean, season 1 with the team we just talked about, like he fell short of expectations. He was rather subpar, and just season 2, like after COVID had hit and after we didn't get the invite to the bubble, so some time had passed, he comes back as this brand new player. We look like this brand new team, and it was quite literally one of the biggest, most unexpected turnarounds in NBA history. Not just for Julius Randle, but our team as a whole. I'm going to get into statistics in a minute, but just to finish illustrating this point, Julius Randle's 3rd season with the Knicks this season has not gone how anybody would have predicted. Obviously, he's played bad, but there's more to it, so let me explain. I have to preface that last season was not all sunshines and rainbows like I was making it seem just a couple minutes ago. We had rough stretches, of course, and the difference was during those rough stretches, Julius Randle was capable of bringing us out of our rut as star players do, not only on the court, but also in press conferences, expressing that the blame be put on him instead of his teammates when fans were upset with something. So these constant displays of unselfishness were nothing short of inspiring, and I think a big part of why we were able to build such a strong bond as a team, and our chemistry was great, and all those sorts of things. So comparing that to this season, there's had to have been at least a dozen times that Julius has declined to speak to the media in press conferences, and when he does participate in post-game press conferences, he'll give no comments when there's a difficult question asked, and it's just a completely different look from last season. So this is something that's not related to Julius's disappointing play on the court that I wanted to express first, because I haven't really seen it discussed much. But to address the unfortunate, very large elephant in the room, Julius Randle's play this season on the court has been super underwhelming and disappointing, and he's regressed in just about every category. I'm going to not sugarcoat anything here. He's been really disappointing. So to give you guys some of these statistics, by the way, these sample sizes are nearly identical. He played 71 games last season out of a total 72, and he's played 69 games this season. Starting off with his points per game, last season he was averaging 24.1. This season, he is currently averaging 20.3 points per game. He's averaging an assist less than he was last season, 6 compared to 5.1. Less steals, more blocks, so that can even out. It's just a smidge. It's just a couple decimals off anyways, so not really worth mentioning. Also not really worth mentioning is that his rebounds are almost identical, but here's where it gets really scary. His field goal percentages. So starting off with this 3-point percentage, which everybody was talking, all Knicks fans were talking about last season. I know Mike Breen talked about it plenty, which it deserved to be talked about, because he went from the 2019 season, his first season with the Knicks, he shot 27% from 3-point range. He didn't come in as a three-point shooter. Like, he wasn't known as a three-point shooter, so we didn't expect great numbers from three from him, but 27% was pretty atrocious. And then last season, he goes and just out of nowhere, like I've been trying to say, 41% from three from last season, well above league average, well above the average for his position. I mean, holy moly, 41% from three is insane. And this season, 30%. So his three-point percentage this season is much closer to what it was in his first season with the Knicks than it was last season, which is almost depressing to think about. Julius's overall field goal percentage is not much more fun to look at. Last season it was 45.6%. This season it's fallen to 41.3%, the lowest it's been since his tenure with the Lakers. And what's also lower this season than it's been since his time with the Lakers is his player efficiency rating. His PER last year was an astounding 19.7, and keep in mind league average is just around 15. This season, it's fallen all the way down to 16.1, and it's never been that low in his career except for one season. That was his second season with the Lakers. Technically his first, well, okay, actually technically his second, but most people will consider it his first because in the very first game of his career, he broke his leg about 2 minutes into the game, so that ended that season for him. Thankfully, did not end his career, so he came back the next season. That was kind of his unofficial rookie season, so that was when his PER was the lowest it ever was in his career. It was 13.9. So this season, it sits just above the 16-point mark, and to compare that to his first season with the Knicks, the 2019-2020 NBA season, it was at 17.5. I think that's the most alarming comparison that I'm going to give you today, because that first season he had with the Knicks, those expectations, like, that was just a complete dumpster fire of a year. We were literally one of the worst teams in the league. And him having a higher player efficiency rating in that season than this season, and it's not just by, a couple of decimals, it's a full 1.5. It's pretty crazy. Another advanced statistic that I can give you if you're somehow still not convinced that Julius has played pretty bad this season is his on-off plus-minus net per 100 possessions. Last season it was plus 0.2, which isn't great, but this season it's negative 9.8, so that is a huge difference, and it's the lowest it's been since that unofficial rookie year I just spoke of earlier. So now we've officially established that Julius Randle has played horrible this year, and it really hurts me to say that because of how much I rooted for the guy in his first season with the Knicks, and then obviously last year with the Knicks, and how so much of our success was dedicated to him. That you can't undermine that. All right, now let's answer the question in the title of this podcast episode, that being, what happened to the Julius Randle from last season? I'm not coming in as a prophet or a sage coming to give you the guaranteed answer, the number one reason and the sole reason why Julius has struggled so much this season, because I don't have that. These are more so going to be theories and just predictions as to why everything's changed from last season to this season. So I've put together 3 separate speculations on why Julius Randle has struggled so mightily this year. The first one kind of piggybacks off of something that I was going over in the last episode when talking about Tom Thibodeau, and that's something that's been right in our faces the entire time, but we might have overlooked it. That's the roster changes in the offseason. To quickly reiterate, the offseason changes that we made were we let go of Reggie Bullock, we let go of Elfrid Payton, as well as Frank Ntilikina, and brought in Evan Fournier and Kemba Walker. We can't say for certain that Julius was super upset that the Knicks let go of Elfrid Payton and Reggie Bullock, 2 big pieces from last season, 2 starters from last season. That'd just be all speculation. That'd just be a complete shot in the dark. I think it's a possibility, but that's not the main thing here. What I think really matters is that these seemingly minor transactions have negatively affected Randle's game. I don't know. It's hard to tell if it's a increased responsibility on defense, a tougher time getting to his shots on offense. It's hard to pinpoint just one thing, but it's also hard to argue that it hasn't. It's hard to argue that this is all Randle's fault, and none of it's due to the fact that his teammates have underperformed as well, and the new acquisitions have not worked as well with the team as expected. So yeah, I feel like this was worth mentioning first because I think it's, out of the 3 I'm going to list, the most likely to actually play into Julius's struggles this year. What I think is guaranteed is that this is just a small piece of the puzzle, and not that this is the number one reason why Julius has struggled so much. It wouldn't make sense for him to have such a sharp decline. I know that I was going on about this in the last episode as well, that we kind of lost our identity of being a super tough defensive team. But I don't think that explains why Julius has looked more lethargic and shows a lot less effort on both ends of the court this season. So I'm going to get into that in just a second. Speaking of the second reason why I think Julius Randle has declined so sharply this year is because of expectations. During his time with the Pelicans, the bar was set rather low, and it was almost as if there were no expectations, so he was going out there and trying to prove his worth, to prove that he was a budding star in the league, and he did just that. He had nothing really to live up to. I mean, you could argue that he had to fill the void left by Anthony Davis. He had to fit in those shoes, but I don't think that was really the idea there. Like in New Orleans, they traded Anthony Davis and got all these young players from the Lakers and all these draft picks. I don't think it was like they singled out Julius Randle and said, okay, be our savior, Like, I don't think it was like that. I think he really did come in, it was a fresh start, and he took advantage of the opportunity. So then the very next season with the Knicks, he's brought in, and we have all these very high expectations set for him, all-star, lead us to the playoffs, this, that, and the third. He underperforms. Knicks fans get very disappointed, and I'm sure you can tell where I'm going with this. So then, the 2020-2021 NBA season rolls around. We don't really have those expectations for him anymore because most Knicks fans were already fed up with him after that one season that it wasn't even a full season. It was like 60 games that got cut short by COVID. So with what had to have felt like another fresh start for Julius Randle, he came in and had an absolute career year, led us to the playoffs. Obviously, we had a disappointing end to this season, but that didn't stop Knicks fans from getting those bars set up very high once again for Julius. And this season, again, you can see where I'm going with this. He has not reached those goals that we set for him, and we're disappointed again. So, what I'm getting at, obviously, he does not perform as well when he has something to live up to, and there's all these sorts of expectations for him. So I truly think it's the mental game that plays into this, and I can't prove this by fact. I don't have a brain scan of Julius Randle's cranium to show you, but it makes sense because 2018 with the Pelicans, little to no expectations. He plays super well. 2019 with the Knicks, fairly high expectations. He underperforms. 2020 with the Knicks, he has those expectations have pretty much disappeared, and he plays extremely well, career year. And then 2021, this season with the Knicks, he has these extremely high expectations, and he underperforms once again. Now is notoriously overrated like he was just 2 seasons ago. You can kind of see this pattern here that has developed. But overall, I think his mental could definitely be a piece of this puzzle. I mean, Clyde calls it out all the time when he catches Randle thinking rather than reacting, whether it's, a jump shot, a pass, or a dribble move, whatever, opportunity to drive. He sometimes thinks more than reacts. We saw a lot, and I mean a lot of that in his first season with the Knicks, and then not nearly as much of it last season. We're starting to see it again, so this just expands on what I was trying to illustrate with that pattern, and that kind of was like reason 2A and 2B, 2A being the expectations and then 2 being his overall mental state. So they obviously go hand in hand. So then moving on to the third and final reason why I think Julius Randle has struggled so much this year is probably a very hot take, but it's something that changed from last season to this season. He got paid this offseason. For those that don't know or might have forgotten, Julius signed a 4-year, $117 million contract extension in August last year. It's totally worth mentioning that he could have waited another year and actually signed a larger contract. He could have signed a max contract of roughly $200 million, but instead decided to sign the 4-year, $117 million deal, giving the Knicks more financial flexibility to build for the future. I thought this was something that was not talked about nearly enough because you don't see this anymore. Like, you see max contracts getting handed out left and right, and players are forced to leave their teams because the teams cannot afford their max contracts. You see that much more often than somebody, taking a pay cut, especially after having a total breakout year. So I thought it was a total class act, and it, like, really was like a sign like, hey, I'm with you guys. Let's build for the future. Let's bring a championship to the city. Unfortunately, it has not been as awesome as I'm making it seem because this season, everything has been different. Julius Randle has looked like a completely different player in terms of his effort, in terms of his leadership, and in general, his willingness to lift up his teammates, take one for the team, stuff that we saw all of last season. To backtrack real quick, I just mentioned his effort. Man, I've seen too many clips on Twitter or wherever of him just, going back, like, to jogging back after a turnover. Again, stuff we saw in season number 1. If he had a turnover last season, it was just full sprints back. There's a famous, but it's not really famous, but there was a pretty, well-known clip of him making a free throw, and then he started walking back, and then Reggie Bullock pointed out that Anthony Davis was in the paint, cherry picking, and Julius just sees that and dead on, just full sprint to Anthony Davis, starts bodying him up, and then defends him for a really great possession. So that just was the epitome of Julius's hustle and his total effort last season. And again, we haven't seen any of that this year. Very, very little. We've seen very little of that this year. So what has caused this? I think if it's just one thing, then I think it's the fact that he got paid. I think it's the fact that he signed this big contract and he proved himself last season and got rewarded for it, and came in this season kind of expecting things to come a little bit easier, and especially with the help that we got. Unfortunately, it hasn't worked out. And again, I say unfortunately because being a Knicks fan has many unfortunate consequences, but the fact of the matter is that last season, Julius Randle led our team in defensive effort every single night, and that is everything. When your best player is leading your team in defensive effort, especially when your team's identity is your defense, like, that is seriously everything. This season, it's just been so much less of that, and then on the flip side, on the offensive end, last season, you never see him hang his head over a turnover, sprinting back on defense and stuff I kind of already went over, but this season, he's the most prone on the team to, have some sort of lapse on offense and turnover, whatever it is, a missed shot. He's more prone to trot back, hang his head than anybody else on the team. And you just didn't see any of that last year. So there you have it, folks. 3 reasons why Julius Randle has changed so much from last year to this year. Number 1, the seemingly harmless roster changes that we made that have affected everybody on the team. Number 2, the expectations that we set for him and how those can affect his mental and just his mental as a whole. And then number 3, the fact that he got paid in the offseason. Did that affect his effort? I think it did, but I'll let you guys decide on all of this. I'd love to hear your takes on it. Thank you for listening to episode number 2 of Yelling and Propelling. It's been a blast so far, and this is only the beginning, so please stay tuned. A real quick heads up, there will not be an episode posted next Friday, but be ready for episode number 3 the following Friday, 7 a.m. on the dot. That is just about all I got for you guys. I hope you have a superb rest of your day or night, and I hope to see you again soon. Go Knicks.